You know, Windows needs to, like, not. Windows decided that despite the fact that I have a setting that says don't update unless it's after this time of day, that it was just going to, like, reboot my machine while I was in the middle of setting up for the stream and apply an update. Thanks, Microsoft. So, needless to say, we had to shimmy and shake because, like, every time I do a Windows update, it hurls like all my settings off. So I was scrambling to get the settings back to normal so that this thing would actually function. Oh man. Okay, so we'll give folks a couple minutes, but we'll go over a couple things. I'm supposed to be at a club Christmas party tonight, but I haven't been feeling too good the last like week or so. I think it's mostly just some seasonal crud. You know, runny nose, feeling tired, having trouble waking up. You know, the usuals, right? But just in case, I don't want to spread nothing to somebody, so I'm staying home and streaming instead. Otherwise, I'd be like booking it on my way out there right now, trying to fight traffic. Let's see, a couple other things. For all those who are supposed to get towels, let's reach. Let's reach. We got the demo towel right here. Those made it out of the mail. I know that Paul Soltero already got his. I imagine a few other folks got theirs as well. But just in case, if they're for some reason not there by tomorrow, shoot me an email. You guys know who you are, uh, and I have the tracking and all that kind of stuff, so we can check to see what the heck's going on. Okay. No, YouTube, I don't want to insert an ad. We've barely started. Go away. Oh, yeah. So let's talk topic kind of fast here. Okay, I do one more announcement, and then we'll do topic. Um, I am participating in Fish Fam Christmas, and I will be putting up a post in the community tab about what giveaways I won in the assignment process. They did a big like who gets what giveaway live stream, and it was all random. So as far as like what Fish Fam Christmas giveaways I get to give away, I'll put those up on the community tab, along with a few other things we're gonna do. Uh, I made some promises earlier this year that involve things like hats and fish room towels, a few other things. You know, we always do kind of a big thing in the holidays each year. So just community tab will tell you the details of what I can tell you, right? I can't tell you like the exact stream of what's given away where, but just know that my usual Tuesday schedule will keep going through end of year, and that's when the fun stuff happens. So let's talk a few things, shall we? Water chemistry. I've got a video out there where I've said that my number one tip for success with plants is understanding your water, and I've talked about success with fish, understanding your water. Understand your water is really, really critical. So we're going to do like a really basic water chemistry explanation. This was actually a request. I received an email asking me specifically to do this, and I want to give that person some appropriate credit. Haha, that was from Patrick. So Patrick, you know who you are if you're watching on the replay crew. But this was his request, and I was like, we could do that. That's a cool little thing. And rather than do like a typical standard video, I want to do a live stream topic because I think that allows us to have some interaction with chat, and the replay crew can leave comments, all that kind of stuff. But most of the time, when we think about water chemistry, we're probably actually talking about a couple of things. We're either talking about what I'm going to call the Bermuda Triangle of parameters, which is GH, KH, and pH, right? Or a lot of people will just think TDS. And maybe they'll think conductivity. I think conductivity is a little over what I want to go into tonight, but we're going to go the easy way, right? Now, the other thing that most people will think about when it comes to water chemistry is your nitrite, nitrate, ammonia, right? The nitrogen cycle side of things. And that plays a little part. Now, we're not going to get into those three. We hopefully already know what those three are, right? Ammonia and nitrite are a result of waste from your fish, from excess food. If you have dying plant matter, if you have wood, it's slowly decaying, etc., etc. It creates waste. That creates ammonia, gets converted by bacteria, creates nitrite, gets converted again, creates nitrate. All right, we explained it anyway, right? But that process, the nitrogen process, causes some things to happen, and those interact with your GH, KH, and pH. Now, before we dive into that, before we dive into the Bermuda Triangle, right? Let's talk TDS really fast because this is simple. TDS is total dissolved solids. And all that means is if you have a container of water, like Bentley's fake vitamin water here, right? And every little thing that is in this water that isn't H2O is a part of what tells you your total dissolved solids. So that includes your GH, your KH, your nitrates, your ammonia, everything. All your micro and macronutrients, that little bit of salt you put in there just in case. If you have certain types of substrates that either buffer upward or add mineral content, you've got Texas Holy Rock, it's adding all sorts of stuff to your water. Total dissolved solids measures all of that combined. Now, in theory, we can use this as a rough estimation of how hard or how soft our water is, but it's not the most accurate. It just tells us how much of everything combined is present in our water with a digital measurement, right? So a lot of times we'll see, like in the Midwest, you'll have TDS like 400 in your water. You'll have very high amounts of overall dissolved solids. We're in the bright Northwest on my city water, which comes from a glacier. During summer, when it's the driest and in theory has the highest content of extra stuff in it, my water's like 26 to 32 TDS out of the tap. There's like nothing in there, right? So it tells us kind of barely roughly how much stuff is present, but not how much of each individual thing. So that's why some people will go by TDS because they know their water so well and they know what they're adding that they kind of just target a number or a range, and that tells them they're the right level of solids, hardness, softness to their water. Okay? Typically, if you're looking at something like reverse osmosis usually gets your water somewhere between 5 and about 15 TDS. So the thing that we think of as like the best way to remove everything from your water still leaves a little bit in there, but almost nothing, right? So just keep that in mind. Now, pH is one of the things that we know the most, and sometimes people chase it. Don't chase pH. I think Paul Soltero said that in chat. I agree with this. Don't fight your water. Sometimes we'll see something online that says like, oh, this fish only survives in pH blah. Fish are really adaptable. Very rarely is a fish so finicky and so fragile that it has to be in perfect pH water. Now, sometimes wild caught fish can be a little tougher to keep in these like perfect parameters, but, keep outside of those perfect parameters. Keep outside. But fighting your water usually ends up with a bigger problem. Now, let me explain. So pH is your power of hydrogen. That's what it stands for. And all this really means is that this is a way to measure whether your water is alkaline, anything over, typically over about 7.2 pH, or acidic, typically anything under about 6.5 pH. Usually somewhere in that 6.5 to 7.2 range, we would consider your water relatively neutral. Okay? Acidic water, often we consider like soft water to be acidic. It's not always acidic. Sometimes your soft water can be basic, which is to say more alkaline. And sometimes your there's all sorts of ways to mess with your water. But pH measures one parameter and tells you, roughly speaking, the excess hydrogen ions that are present in the water. Now, the important thing to keep in mind is that when you shift pH, it changes in an order of magnitude. So, if your water is currently sitting at 7.5 pH and it goes to 8.5 pH, you have increased its alkalinity 10 times. So if you were at like alkalinity 100, now you're at alkalinity 1,000. This is not the right numbers, but this is just to understand what's happening. Every increase of 1 pH is 10 times the amount one direction or the other. So as an example, if your tank is sitting at a perfect 7 pH and it goes down to 6, now it is 10 times more acidic than it used to be. And where this becomes important is that all of our beneficial bacteria, so that's stuff that processes ammonia, nitrite, and creates nitrate, and in some cases also with our anoxic and even anaerobic bacterias that can do some other functions like denitrification. Those bacteria typically, once you hit under 6 pH, begin to die. So when we usually hear about a pH crash, it's not because the water is so acidic that it hurts the fish, although sometimes they will show these signs. It's because the water becomes so acidic, it's killing off all of the things that process the waste in your water, and you start getting buildups of ammonia and nitrite. And those are what become toxic for your fish. So typically, most aquarists are shooting for somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5. But here's where the other parts of the Bermuda Triangle come into play. Now we're going to move on to carbonate hardness, KH. Carbonate hardness measures carbonate in your water. So if you think about like sodium bicarbonate, aka baking soda, the bicarbonate, that carbonate that's present, that is your KH, carbonate hardness. And the way that KH interacts with pH is really simple. Carbonates bind to the hydrogen ions and help stabilize your pH. So if you have very low KH, you risk having pH crash or pH shock. Both of these are two different things. We won't try to get too deep on this, okay? Typically, there's a lot of easy ways to have KH. If you're in a fairly like mineral rich water, you're in that liquid rock, you probably have it already. But you can either add KH with something like sodium bicarbonate, or you can add it with calcium carbonate. However, calcium carbonate will also influence your GH. So here's where the third part of our Bermuda Triangle comes into play, right? We're going to keep this in mind. Just keep remembering the Bermuda part is coming, but the triangle matters here, right? All things in some semblance of balance. GH measures our general hardness, which is to say, it measures the calcium and magnesium content in the water. So when you have calcium carbonate, aka crushed coral, like dolomite chips, aragonite sand, etc., any of those things that you think about, they often add calcium carbonate, so they will increase both your KH and your GH as they slowly dissolve into your water, especially if you have water with almost nothing in it, like I do. Crushed coral is really helpful for people like me who have basically water with nothing in it, where it's fairly soft and you risk, because you don't have enough carbonate hardness, dealing with pH crashes or not being able to keep stable water parameters because you have nothing to hold things in place. Now, GH really is just telling you those two parameters. But keep in mind, when you mess with one, you will mess with the others. So let's explain this. This is where the Bermuda part comes into. You cannot, just as an easy rule, there are some real weird ways that you could do this. You chemistry nerds are probably like, stop it. Shh, quit. You cannot raise your general hardness without also increasing your pH. Because as you add more mineral content, you are going to add more alkalinity. That's the easiest way to think about it. You're adding more calcium and magnesium. That's going to raise the pH. Great for all those fish that like a little more mineral content, especially you get into like African cichlids or live bearers, all that stuff needs lots of calcium present in their diet and the water. Shrimp, snails, great. Carbonate hardness can be changed without raising GH, but almost every time you raise GH, with very minimal exceptions, you are probably using something that can raise your KH. Now, there are specific products you can go out there, like some of your shrimp salts and stuff like that, that are designed only to raise GH. They don't have carbonate in the like calcium and magnesium mixture. But most of the time, the most common thing we use to help buffer our water, and KH and GH are a part of buffering our water. And when we say buffer our water, that means we get pH stability. Okay? That's the big thing. The buffer is just stabilizing pH. This is where this gets real wacky, right? You can, with certain chemicals, people are mentioning it in chat, I know. Well, at this one and that one and that one. Yes, it's because they don't have carbonate mixed in. But if you're using more natural sources, you will almost always raise GH and KH at the same time, with some exceptions. So when you use some of those products that don't have carbonate, salty shrimp, equilibrium, etc., they can raise your GH without raising your KH. And similarly, if you use sodium bicarbonate, and in some cases you can also use potassium bicarbonate, but that's its own special case. We're going to throw that aside and not talk about it too much right now. Those will raise your KH without increasing your GH because they don't contain calcium or magnesium. However, whenever you mess with one, you will mess with something else. Typically, pH is the one that gets affected. That's why this is kind of like the Bermuda Triangle. It's a mystery of how to perfectly understand it, but anytime you screw with one, it screws with something else too, because it's got to mess with you. That's why we're calling it the Bermuda Triangle. It's got to mess with you. It can't be easy. So, the end result here is really simple. GH, KH, and pH all interact with each other. If one is fairly low, there is a risk that another is very low too, and that can cause bigger problems. Now, I mentioned that our happy carbonate hardness water chemistry triangle over here also interacts with the nitrogen cycle. And let me explain that as our last lesson. As the nitrogen cycle progresses, as our beneficial bacteria consumes ammonia to create nitrite, and then the other beneficial bacteria that's present consumes that nitrite to make nitrate. During this process, it consumes portions of our carbonate hardness. It uses up some of your carbonates as a portion of the chemistry happening in this process. So, this is why we've talked about before that in theory, you can have some huge risks of doing the no water changes ever, depending on your water. Because slowly through that process, you are consuming carbonate hardness. And if you're not doing something that refreshes carbonate hardness, like Bentley's water that has nothing in it, you can eventually drop your KH so low that your pH will no longer remain stable. That's why people like me add crushed coral to our water. It gives us that buffer and protects us. Easy? Understandable? Do we got it? What do you think? That's basics. You can go super deep on this. There's literally like Harvard level water chemistry papers you could find out there. But this is the dummies method, aka me. This is how I understand this stuff. I break it down to a way that's a little more easy to understand. Because the deeper chemistry behind this, like conductivity, you start getting into conductivity, that's a little too smart for Bentley. It's more than I usually need. It can matter. It matters. A lot of people, you're going to have folks like, I'm sure Kelly's going to beat me up in chat and be like, oh, you use this and XYZ, it's simple. And I'm going to be like, not for me, I'm dumb. But the basics are this: GH is mineral content in your water, KH is carbonates, which stabilize your pH, which measures the hydrogen in your water. pH tells you whether or not your water is becoming acidic or becoming alkaline or sitting at neutral. Don't chase pH. Throw that out. Water stability is more important than chasing specific numbers. But understanding that when you look at your tests and like say you test your carbonate and GH, right? KH and GH, and you see, oh, I have 2 degrees carbonate hardness and I have 10 degrees general hardness. The baseline target you want for stability is 4 and 4. So, if your carbonate hardness is under 4, you might want to add something to increase your carbonate hardness. If your GH is super low and you have fish that like having mineral content, you want to increase your GH. Both of these, when you increase them, will probably increase your pH some, but that's okay. We're probably not doing such a big step in the pH that it becomes dangerous. It's all about getting stable, long-term parameters to be roughly the same the whole time. There you go. Easy peasy. And then TDS just measures all the things ever that are in your water and doesn't really tell you what all those things are, just that there's a bunch of them present. Or maybe not very many of them present, like my water. Matthew Cologne, how can I add crushed coral to a tank with just a sponge filter? That's easy. Rinse the crushed coral first because it's pretty dusty and you don't want that dust getting all up in the water. Okay. But after you've given it a really thorough rinse, just sprinkle it around your substrate. The water moves around through your tank. I've also created like little piles around my sponge filters before so that I know the water is moving around that and slowly picking it up over time. It's not like you don't have to have your whatever you're using for your buffer. It doesn't have to always be like in a filter. Just a lot of people do that to do it like the fast and lazy way because it has the highest water contact that way when you're using powered filters. But if you're using a sponge, just sprinkle it all throughout your substrate or like create kind of like a ring of it around your sponge filter. You can do it either way. The water is going to move around and it's slowly going to dissolve up into the water as the water does its thing and moves throughout your aquarium and goes through your sponge, blah, 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 right? You'll be okay. Just don't like go, if you're not currently using crushed coral, don't dump a ton in right away. Kind of slowly add it. Let your water slowly adjust and you'll be all right. Let's see here. James, here's a good one for you. My tap water parameters: TDS 115, GH 0, KH 0, pH 6.8. I've been running tanks here for 6 years, no pH crashes. I mean, I'd wonder whether or not your GH and KH tests are measuring correctly. Because it seems weird to have some TDS but have literally 0 KH and GH. Like you have to work hard to get no carbonates and no mineral content. But then again, I suppose it's possible that you don't use an additive of any form. Very interesting. I guess it depends on how you're doing your water changes and stuff like that. Because usually it's over time that those crashes occur. And if you're doing like regular 50% water changes, you're probably all right. It is weird that you have like 0 buffer and you've never run into any pH issues. It's weird. It's interesting, but it's weird. my water will crash like crazy if I don't buffer it. It gets angry. It's because there's like nothing in there. Let's see. Kingfisher Guys, thinking of switching Easy Green from Nylock G. I have hard water. Corey is a proponent of using his versus others. Why? What would be the benefits of this switch? Well, I mean, to be hyper transparent, the difference between Nylock G and Easy Green as far is really small. It basically comes out to Corey uses slightly more nitrites in nitrogen in his Easy Green, and the balance of the rest of the nutrients is a little different than how Thrive is balanced. But of course, he's going to suggest using his. It's his product. He makes money off of it. Right? I mean, not to dog. I use the stuff, right? Because it's local to me. But there's not a huge difference between the two. If you look at like the guaranteed analysis, which is going to give you the more sciencey understanding of it, the difference is not very huge. It depends on like if you've had serious problems, or if honestly, if one is cheaper than the other and you're not having an issue, just take the cheaper one. There's bigger differences when you move to some of the products made by other companies, because some of them are more diluted or more concentrated in some cases. Depends on which product it is, and I don't know all of them off the top of my head, to be honest, but you know, several of them are all roughly in the same ballpark, and then you get stuff like Flourish, which is watered down, and because they want you to dose that stuff daily and all sorts of crazy nonsense. But yeah, the difference in those particular two products is pretty limited. By the way, chat, just so you know, at this time, feel free to at Bentley Pasco ask your questions. All those kind of good things. We'll dive into the fun times. Bob, on a pH scale, I give the stream a 10. It's quite alkaline of you. Oh Lord. All right. Calling it basic. You guys, you're so silly in chat. But yeah. Brandon, does water chemistry matter if I'm trying to grow plants immersed versus submersed? Kind of. So you do want some stability regardless, but the mineral content in the water won't matter as much with immersed plants, in the sense that because they now have access to atmospheric CO2 and a few other things, they can do a lot more. Because like a lot of your plants like softer water, and as your water gets harder and harder, it's harder for them to absorb certain things, which seems counterproductive, right? You would figure with more of them present, they could absorb more, but kind of not. And the science behind that is way more in depth than I want to go into or can actually explain, because I can't. Remember, dummy, internet dummy. Got it. Um, but the rough is you're actually, it's easier to deal with those higher mineral levels because there's atmospheric CO2 and it's in such higher concentration than we can ever do it when it's fully submerged. The biggest thing is mostly when it comes to, you don't want to get your pH too out of whack in liquid rock aquatics. Just explain this. And the real reason behind this is that part of the way that plants absorb nutrients out of the water actually is a bacterial process in their root systems. And when you get over pH 8 and 6 and under pH, that's when the bacteria that help in those situations actually start to die. They're actually more fragile than in some cases many of our fish can be, if that makes sense. So it's easier to deal with higher levels of things being immersed, but realistically, for most things we're trying to keep, you're okay kind of in all the standard water parameters. If my water from the tap is 0 GH and I want to keep shrimp who need some GH, I have to use Seachem Equilibrium or Wonder Shell. What is the best way to maintain GH over water changes? So typically, it's just a matter of understanding that when evaporation occurs, you're usually not losing really much mineral hardness. You might lose a little bit, which is why you see those like mineral rings on the side of your tank if you let it keep evaporating over time, right? But you're not losing very much. So you basically need to do your math based on how much water you're removing. The easiest way is probably anything that has a like regular dosing mechanism to it. So like salty shrimp has stuff. You have stuff with equilibrium. There's a lot of various GH buffering products that are out there that you can use, and they all have some kind of dosing instruction, and they're designed understanding like the difference between evaporation and water changes, etc., etc. So you're probably safest there, and just test your water. That's the biggest thing. Test your water. Keep monitoring your GH in your cage. You can do it on simple test strips. You don't have to go with like a really expensive, crazy liquid kit or anything, and just keep it close to itself the whole time. If you start seeing things go a little out of whack, like oh we're losing mineral content, the next time you do, add a little extra. Is it going way too high? Change a little bit more. GH is not buffering. Say it louder for the back. It kind of is. How deep you want to go down this rabbit hole? Kelly's gonna go all sciencey on me. Dummy on the internet. I'm trying to make it easy for people. Doesn't have to be perfect, just has to be understandable. I'm not looking for like a chemistry degree level of mastery here. I'm looking for can't keep an aquarium without killing fish or having pH crashes. I understand you have a degree in biochemistry. I'm really good at explaining stuff though. I love you, Kelly. I know you're gonna hit me whenever I see you. Okay. Also, now that I'm out of make up a champ for you. Let's go, champ. Good to see you, buddy. I've said it's mineral content. Kelly's not listening all the way. Kelly's only listening to what Kelly wants to listen to so that Kelly can correct me. Selective hearing. Jeez. Oh Lord. All right, let's go back to questions. Before I put my foot further in my mouth. James, I use both Tetra test strips and API liquid, 25 to 30 water percent. Jeez, that's interesting. That's interesting. Your water parameters are like that. That's crazy. I'd be curious to know, like, if you went and did the full like spectrum analysis of what makes up your TDS. I mean, your TDS isn't super high. Don't get me wrong, but I'd be curious, having no GH and no KH, what's making up that TDS? Is it like lots of iron or potassium or what, just pure nitrogen? What the heck's going on in that thing? Oh man. Let's see. Leo, why does CChem line of equilibrium and the other buffers get your TDS to around 150 to 200 TDS for a pH around 7 KH slash fry 2 to 3? Yes. They're probably pushing. So KH is not necessarily the full sum of your TDS. So you could have more things that are present in the equilibrium that don't increase your KH and might not even increase your GH, but still create TDS numbers. Where salty shrimp is focused on really, really specific things, and equilibrium is more designed not necessarily for like shrimp, like salty shrimp is, but for planet aquariums. So it'll include other things that plants like that maybe don't matter for shrimp in those volumes. So that's why you'll see different TDSs, but they'll still target a similar KH and GH, or similar just pure GH if you're looking at like the B versions that don't add any carbonate hardness, right? Because some of your caradinas don't like carbonate hardness because they're weirdos. They want that pH to crash, man. They want James's water all day long. Although they want some GH in there. Patty Boy Gaming. Is it weird that I use fluval stratum with sand substrate on all my planet tanks? My tap water, which has 6.6 pH. I primarily keep rams, and they are breeding and thriving. Nope. Nothing's weird about that. I mean, I guess if it was like you're putting sand underneath, it might be a little weird, but yeah. My auto drip system keeps pH stable, hasn't changed in 10 years, from Greg Jones. Well, yeah, if you're dripping water in, you're going to basically doing the rough akin of how like rivers function, where there's just a continuous water change occurring. It's in a significantly lower volume than a river or a stream, right? Because those are changing high volumes of water in comparison at all times. But still, effectively, we're trying to create the same thing with most drip ship systems, continuous water change, instead of just like even like more standard auto water change systems where it's like maybe I water change 20%, big quotation marks, a day, because it depends on how your system's set up, blah 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 blah. But yeah. It's some, for some reason, like YouTube is being really aggressive on some of your guys' comments, and I'm not really sure why, because they're all fine, but it's lots of spammers through recently. YouTube's getting kind of sus. Just saying. Bob Purcell, do you think you could use Flourish to dial in water parameters? For the low price of $1,000 a water change, you too can use the Flourish system to have perfect water. I know what you're trying to do. By the way, your question about setting up the 40-gallon breeders. So I did all of the rewiring that I needed to do, except for running airlines. I ran some airlines to some of the tanks that are still reliant on the big air pump that I have up there. but not all of the airlines. More of them need to be run after I get the 40s in place. I have some just black backgrounds, some static ones that are vinyl that I think they arrived today. Maybe they're due to arrive tomorrow. But I'm waiting on those so I can apply black backgrounds to the tanks without having to do paint. I just don't want to paint them. I'd rather have something that I can just apply with some soapy water and a putty knife, basically. And then I got some good suggestions of like using a wipe on stain on the wood boards that I use in my racks. I thought about it for a few minutes. I haven't decided whether or not like I want to stain them or not because aesthetically speaking, I don't care. But you know, it might look better if it's completely dark. But yeah, there's things like that. So I'm hoping to get. Basically, I'll make that decision this weekend. And if I'm going to do the wipe on stain, then I'll do the wipe on stain, let it cure, and then something like Monday, I'll move the tanks in after I get the backgrounds on them. But you're going to see a video this week with a little Easter egg in it. So we'll see if people recognize the Easter egg about what's going to start happening on tank number 2. We might leave other Easter eggs in the following videos that come, but basically we're gonna have a few videos through between now and the end of the year doing that, and I'll be doing basically throughout the end of the year. I'm slowly working where I'm not working right on getting those tanks going and getting them up. My lady's actually gonna help me a little bit with the aquascaping, the first tank that's being done with all the plants. I just she's more artsy than me, so I'm gonna let her help me with that. I have a bunch of driftwood in there, and I've got this idea in my head, but you know, I want her to experience that because maybe I'm gonna try and get her to set up her own tank. Just saying. Terry's Tropical Tanks, good to see you, buddy. Also, Baron Tropicals, good to see you back, my friend. It's been a while. I'm hoping at some point I can come down to Texas, and maybe be able to see you in person. But yeah, so it's basically throughout the end of this year, I'm going to be slowly working on that and hopefully have at least one of them completely running, if not the other two. And then I'm going to take some time, let them settle in, do all their stuff before I get fish in them. Right. But yeah, slow process. We're working on it. Haven't figured out. I know exactly what fish are going in the first planet tank. I'm not sure what are going to go in the second tank. That might just be a colony of some of the guppies out of the guppy mansion. I might go and like hand select the best and brightest of my guppies and make a more like concentrated breeding experiment. We'll see. I haven't figured that out, or I might I don't know, I might fill it with more rainbows. Oh man. Another Asian guy. Jeez. Come on, man. You're unique. You don't have to be just another dude. Any suggestion for test kits for like potassium, iron, etc.? Stuff normally not found in the API test kit. You know, those are really hard to actually get in the United States. For some reason, like you can get them like crazy in Europe through JBL is probably the best company. There is another one out there. Let me see here. You can API does make some of those things, but not all of them. I'm trying to remember what company. There is one that makes a bunch of individual liquid kits outside of JBL. I know JBL does them in Europe, but I don't think you can get those in the United States at all. I could have swore I saw something on like Amazon. I'm actually looking right now, trying to see if I can find. There is a way to do like. I mean, you can. There's ways to get photospectrometers, but those things are several $100s, and that's probably not what you're looking for. Man, it's you know, in the reef kit, there's several things that you can get that aren't present in the basic freshwater master kit that are actually useful. So potassium, there's a few other things in the reef kit that are actually really awesome. And then Sarah does have a test kit box. And I'm trying to remember what all is present in that thing. Hold on. I've literally got it here. I'm trying to look. You can test iron, potassium, or no, not potassium. That's something else. Hold on. Let me zoom in. Just do it. Need a Shia LaBeouf right now. Oh, of course, the image is so bad that if I zoom in, I can't read anything. Thanks, Sarah. Let's see here. Ah, ha, 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 ha. Nitrate, phosphate, iron, and chlorine. Why would you care about a chlorine test kit? This ain't a pool. Uh, Shorter answer is probably you're going to have to dig around. There's got to be another company that's doing things that allows you to test some of the other stuff that's a little more niche. Iron's like an example. I mean, API makes some of those. You just have to buy them individually, and they're kind of expensive. But yeah, yeah. I don't have a great answer. Sorry, man. Okay. Oh, gotta watch out. This is a non-fish question. Sorry about that. I got my. Like I said, I have a runny nose. I'm trying to fight this thing all day. I'm taking all sorts of meds trying to keep this thing under control. From Way, would you recommend moving to Seattle? Moving to the Seattle area. My job's HQ is in Seattle, but I'm working remote in Florida. Is this purely for the purpose of fish or like a legitimate all reasons why question? Because if you like your warm weather, you will hate Seattle. It is only warm here for like 2.5 months out of the year. Most of the time, it is like 50s or 40s and cloudy or gray and lightly raining. There's a lot of light rain, tends to be kind of cold, tends to be very overcast for like 9 months of the year. That's super common. You're not going to get any hurricanes. You're not going to get big thunderstorms like every day at 6 p.m. on the dot, like parts of Florida will. You have a really good aquarium club out here, and you got a really good one in Portland that's not all that far away. You have amazing water if you're on the city water. You have a horrible housing market. If you are trying to buy a home of any form out here, it is an effing nightmare. Mostly because it's so expensive. I don't live in like the nice part of town at all, okay? Not to say that I live in a bad area, but more just like I live in a suburb that is less affluent, right? And my the quote value of my house is stupid. It's stupid. And part of it's the pandemic and all the previous stuff that increased housing prices everywhere. But the problem is there is so much high paying work in Seattle, even with the layoffs that are occurring in tech, that the housing prices just stay like really overinflated. So if you're looking to own a home, it's difficult unless you're like a two incomes that pay fairly well. It's very hard to get housing here. And rents are fairly high too because there's this huge demand. There's a lot of people here. But the positives, there's also lots of work options, especially in like the tech sector and engineering sectors, all that kind of stuff, right? There's a lot of stuff here. There is a ton of good food in Seattle, but you have to define what you consider good food. And you're probably like, what I mean is if you're looking for like really, really high level, like your Michelin star type restaurants, you're not going to find a ton of those. There's some, do not get me wrong. There are some amazing restaurants in Seattle proper, and you will pay a couple of limbs to eat there. But if you're looking for just general good food, Seattle in general is extremely diverse. You have all sorts of cultures that have moved here and created a diverse dining scene. Now you're going to see a lot of like Thai, teriyaki, Chinese, because you have a really high Asian population here. But you also have a high Indian population. So if you like a lot of like Indian food and curry and stuff like that, there's tons of great food. Chicago is the best food city in the country. Disagree. Disagree instantly. Have you been to Las Vegas? It's overpriced, but you can get basically all of the best stuff cheaper than you can most other places in the world. But depending on what you're looking for, there's a ton of stuff out here. Do you like Mediterranean food? Do you like Asian food? Do you like Indian food? Do you like some like African food, like Afghani and stuff like that? Moroccan? It's all over the place. It's all over the place. There's pockets of great food everywhere. There's a fantastic food truck scene in Seattle. And by that, I don't mean like the old association, the Roach Coach. No. I mean like people that should be legitimate restaurants with good food that are instead at a food truck. It's kind of like higher level food trucks. You kind of pay for it a little bit. Food is expensive in Seattle, which is really unfortunate. And part of that is just because the minimum wage is a lot higher, so the costs are higher. Blah 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 blah. Right? Deep dish pizza is a scam. I always go back to like the old the rant from the Daily Show where like he just loses his mind on the pizza rant. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? I cannot remember his last name. John. Jeez, I feel really bad. I watched this recently, and in general, I like the original host of the Daily. Well, not the original host, the second host of the Daily Show, who most of us know as the actual host of the Daily Show, not Trevor Noah or the original host, which was Craig Kilborn for a while. Chicago Pizza is yeah, Jon Stewart. Thank you. Jeez, Chad, thank you for saving me because I'm a dope. My brain's just like, you're not going to remember that right now. You're fried from all of the stuff we did earlier today. Game over, man. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. The thing that you don't have out here that you have in like huge volumes in Florida, you don't have any good Cuban food out here. You have very limited options for a good set of Cuban food. So if you really like Cuban food, which I do, it's very hard to find good Cuban out here. But I mean, you have huge populations of a lot of different things, so you get a very nice, diverse options for food. But if you want to live your life in like pho, Thai, and stuff like that, it's everywhere. It's everywhere, and you have lots of options, and people will tell you whether it's good or sucks. And it's very easy to figure that out because the ones that suck don't last long. Because there are lots and lots and lots of restaurants, even in the like suburbs and stuff. It's just about like what you really go into, right? Does Seattle have roundabouts? Being an Englishman living in Canada, I'm astounded at the lack of. Instead, we stop traffic 100% of the time. There are some, but not many. They're uncommon in the United States in general. Europe uses them a lot more. There are like technically more efficient flows of traffic, but they're starting to put more and more over time, and like people just like go dumb when they encounter them and don't know how to drive around them properly. It's kind of hilarious, to be honest. Okay, we'll get back on fish stuff. I know I could talk food all day long because there's lots of stuff I love. There's other things that like I've tried to enjoy that my body is just like, we ain't doing that, dude. Ain't gonna do it. No, no, no. It's got to be another fish question in here. We talk a lot about food. EJ fishes. You know you'll do the rainbows. I'm actually really tempted to do the. Pistos is not the correct answer for me. I'm just not a pisto guy. Why would I keep pistos when I can keep rainbows? Why would I keep grumpy small cichlids when I can keep lots of big beautiful rainbows? I respect you, Paul, but no. If I was going that route, if I was doing a dwarf cichlid of any form, I would probably actually do cribbensis. Just because I like cribs quite a lot, and not specifically pelvic acromis pulcher, the traditional crib, but more one of the Teniatus species. Because I love those fish. I love the way that the females court the males, and it's not the more traditional where like the male is the more pretty fish. Like females are the way more pretty fish. And you get like these beautiful like royal purple colors in a lot of the Teniatus species. So I just love those fish, man. Just love them, love them, love them. But yeah, I don't know. I'm tempted to do guppies just because it would be fun to spend some time, um, kind of hand selecting and more breeding like a traditional breeder would, not like the weird lazy style that I do. Bentley Pasco, what's the best seafood dish? It's a fispy food question, fishy food question. Well, so I'm a person that doesn't like, um, I don't like fish. I like shellfish. So for me, some is it usually is probably something. It's something with scallops involved is most likely like the best fish dish to me. I've had I've had a butternut squash risotto with scallops, and it was probably one of the most amazing things I've ever had in my life. And me and my lady still regularly talk about that dish, but that's when we went to Gordon Ramsay's restaurant in Vegas, so it's kind of unfair because it's like very expensive. But I've also had, scallops a number of different ways that are phenomenal. I love scallops quite a lot. But also like, shrimp, lobster, all those kind of things. Big fans of those things. I can be very simple about my what seafood I do like, but I don't eat like basically any fish. It's a big texture thing for me. Most fish is a texture I don't like. There's some that I do want to try, like monkfish. I've heard is more like lobster in its texture, and some of the other things that are more like steaky in their texture. But probably not tuna, just because tuna has a very fishy flavor to it, from my experience. But I'm sure somebody will be like, no, not if you do X, Y, and Z. And I'll probably try it at some point. But yeah, yeah. Paul, I do have some crips for you. Ooh. I might care there. Wait, Xinjiang style barbecue is the best type of barbecue in the world. Does anyone disagree? I vehemently disagree. Jeff Kane, Manwich is the only barbecue for me. I'm a big Texas style barbecue kind of guy. I like a proper dry rub brisket. If it's done right, it's one of the most amazing things in the world. It literally melts in your mouth like butter. It's moist and flavorful and wonderful, and there's a reason why it's as loved as it is in the States. I'm sure if Bob is still around, he would agree. uh, there's a big roundabout where I grew up near Long Beach, California. There was almost always an accident there. Yeah, people in the States just have like no clue how to drive in roundabouts. It's like we're just like incapable of handling it. I don't know what it is. Kingfisher's catch. What species of Chalatherina should I start breeding and why? That's a good question. I I really think if you're trying to breed them for the purpose of getting a fish that's easy to sell to stores and spread around or that people are going to be interested in, you're going to want the Alenais. They're just such a chaste fish. They're so beautiful. There's so much color in them. Even the females have color, right? You could look at something like the fasciatas, but they only color up a little bit for part of the time of the day, and that's what makes them less appealing. But when they do, man, they're amazing. Whereas Alenais just always have color. If it's got a little bit of blue, a little bit of yellow, or red if it's like the Sirwu style. And they still keep that nice little yellow stripe though, which is the big one. And the females have it too. It's much more subdued, right? But they have color. And most Chalatherinas, the females are really plain. So that's part of what makes the Elenai really interesting. The other Chalatherina you could go for, it's kind of more like a chase rainbow fish, nerdy fish, is going to be the Axelrodi. They're very expensive though. Very expensive. Glossolepis. Ooh. I mean, realistically, the more attractive and desired fish are either the Wanamensis or the red dragons. Jeez, brain. I'm gonna be very angry at myself. Multisquamata. Jeez. My brain was just like, nah, I don't want to. But if you want to have a little more fun, and you can find them, maculosus. Maculosus are basically impossible to find in the United States. It's a freaking nightmare. Me and my friend Mike Stanbaugh have been trying to source them correctly so that we can get some back into the States. I know Lucas Bretz has them, but he hasn't had babies forever. and some other issues. Gary lost his, so yeah, it's tough, 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 tough. There was another question, and we're close to the end here, so we'll quickly zoom through two questions really fast. Are there any foods that enhance rainbow fish color? Baby brine shrimp. If the fish is red, like having a higher krill level of diet is going to enhance them. Anything that has similar to like baby brine shrimp, right? Where it's gonna when you see a baby fish, they got that little pink belly. It's gonna do the same thing. It's great to help. Um, when you're looking at like yellows and blues and stuff like that, you don't necessarily want a red enhancer. So I wouldn't worry about food to enhance color. Good quality food, rainbows will show good color, and usually that means mixing in live and or frozen regularly with your prepared foods. You don't want to live purely on flake. Mix it up. They'll be happy. They'll show great color. Plain and simple. But just keep in mind, certain rainbows, they only show color for a little bit. Usually it's like early in the day and they kind of fade off, etc., etc. But yeah. There was one other one I want to grab real fast. It'd be probably our last question. Wait, what exactly makes extreme krill flakes better than Tetra, Aquion, Fluval, Bug Bites flakes? I don't know that it's like just better, period. It's more like it's a high quality food. Yeah, you pay a little extra for it. it it's a company that's here in the States, but the big thing that I found is just it's opinion. Some of us have just seen our fish go for that food more aggressively and like it more and eat more of it. Like they eat it as fast as possible compared to maybe some other foods they don't eat quite as quickly with some of the extreme foods. But I've seen similar with a lot of the bug bite flake as well. So but most of it is just opinion. A lot of it is just like, well, I watched my fish and they seem to eat this faster. And that's really what it comes down to. There's no like perfect science to tell you, well, it's because this, and there's going to be folks like your New Life Spectrum folks will be like, no, we just make better food. And it's like, well, okay, explain why. We just make better food. That's a bad answer. It's all opinion. Unless you're like directly selling the product, then you're kind of incentivized to say that it's better because you're selling it. Right? So it's like, I'm sure Northfin will tell you their food is better because they're Northfin. Yeah, Bug Bite has a flake now. They've had it for, I think, like about a year now. Maybe a little bit longer. But you can find flake versions of all of the standard Bug Bite stuff. Some of it's really awesome, actually. Although I found that the color enhancing flake can turn your water like a little like reddish pink tint. So just, go easy on that one. Okay, last one. Brandon, I'll get your question really quick. Does adding bacterial and fungal powders for shrimp benefit plant roots, both immersed and submersed? I'm a little leery on fungal powders. It depends on what you mean by fungal powders. But it depends. Basically, those bacterial powders would have to work their way down in there. So that's why a lot of, if you look at like ADA Power Sand and some of their additives that they add to the substrate before you pour the substrate on top, those are designed to create and feed bacteria down in the substrate down low to help root growth, right? They're down there to create healthy bacteria colonies in your substrate, and that helps with your roots and all that kind of stuff. But if you're adding powder afterward into the water column, a little less likely to permeate all the way down into there instead of just being up in the water column itself. But in theory, yes. A little leery on the fungal powder. It depends on specifically what you're talking about, but hope that helps. Anyway. Raphael S. Okay. That's actually a super long question because I don't think that I can explain how you would scale very quickly. And I know that dinner is ready downstairs and I need to go eat dinner. I spent some time with my lady too, man, If you remember that next week, I'll happily answer it. I'll happily answer that. And I'll make it my first question. And I'll try to remind myself. Maybe I'll just make that the topic. But probably requires a longer answer than we might have time for right now. So, with that being said, gang, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you learned a little something, despite Kelly saying I'm wrong. Uh, Keep in mind that over the next few weeks is when a lot of Fish Fam Christmas starts happening for a lot of channels. So be watching that out. If you watch your smaller creators that are participating, you got ways to win some sweet giveaways. Some of them include tickets to the Keystone Clash, where people like me will be speaking. So you'll get an opportunity to hang out, meet me in person, and we'll probably even have some brand new special limited edition merch just for that wonderful event. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.